listening to Coffee and Conversation with Recovery Advocate Network, the nonprofit organization that strives to address the staggering disparity in resource availability for individuals suffering from mental health disorders, processing disorders, addictions, trauma healing, and sexual identity challenges. Together, we strive to end the stigma associated with these challenges so that true healing can begin. Welcome back to Coffee and Conversation with Recovery Advocate Network. I'm your host, Ange, and I welcome you to episode number 89. Today is part 2 of the Wolfson Series. Now, Steve Wolfson joined us in episode 83 and discussed the art of life lessons through stories and documentaries. He is a writer, filmmaker, health consultant, and a retired dentist. Now, in that first part, we talked so much about his children's stories, about how he got into doing those, and about the impact he's made on the world. This one, we dig deeper into topics around pain management using things like mindfulness and hypnosis and how he's used that in his practice. We also dig into one of the documentaries, specifically the story about the mental health hospital in Weyburn and the documentary that he did on it. It's so amazing. So you can find it online. I recommend that you watch it. I thoroughly enjoyed it. So as I mentioned, we also talked about pain management through some of these skills. We talked about healing attributes of music and the topic of ice baths, which we both know there's lots of science around, and both of us we don't like cold, so we're skipping those. But he shared his ideas, most importantly, on how he believes that empowering communities can help really make a significant impact in individuals through all of their mental wellness journey. So you definitely want to catch that. Okay, now, if you didn't watch the first episode, watch this one now, and then go back and watch that one. You'll thoroughly enjoy it. And it's time for our 3 C's. Those are our rules of engagement. That first C, well, of course, it's the click, love, like, follow, subscribe, and share button. You never know who really needs to understand some of these stories, so please share it with someone today. Maybe also consider clicking on the website, which is www.recoveryadvocatenetwork.org, and consider clicking on the donate button at the top of that. Every dollar goes towards helping individuals who need bridge grants for treatment. So pause for a second, go ahead and do that. Okay, the second C, well, it is commit. Commit to staying for the full episode. Steve shares a new motivational quote at the end. But really, I love how we walk through the impact of seeing humans as humans, trying to make a positive contribution to society with everyone around us, and the ability to maybe step back and determine when doing nothing is the greatest gift of love you can give. So that is our second C. And of course, what is our third C? Well, it is coffee. So fill up your coffee, sit back, relax, and let's get started. Super stoked today. I have part 2 of what I called the Wolfson Series. And in part 1, if you haven't listened to it, you must go back and listen to it. Mm-hmm. I talked to Dr. Wolfson about a lot about his journeys in life, but we also spent a lot of time talking about writing children's books. And normally I am like obsessed. So everyone who does know, everyone with RAND, we're all 100% volunteers. And so we're also like trying to remember to reread everyone's bio before we interview them and read their books and do all of these things. And I completely missed the second half of Dr. Wolfson's bio that is so critical for so many of the listeners here. So I watched the documentary that he's going to share some about, and then I learned more about him, and I was like, we need to do a take 2, part 2. This is not take 2. This is part 2, because part 1 is also amazing. So now I'm going to do my classic, just shut up for a moment. And Steve, will you tell us why you're back with us again today?
Well, I'm really happy to get invited back. It was lovely. The first conversation we had was great. Yeah, I just tell people that I went to school, got a biology degree at Tulane, and then ended up at the University of Pennsylvania, got a dental degree. I'm a dentist. And then I went on and got a public health degree. So once I was in dentistry, I realized private practice wasn't for me. So I went on into public health and moved to Saskatchewan with that. And then eventually, the public health program I was working for was closed down, and so I found other things. So I've been writing kids' books and doing documentaries. So it was a good chance to come back and talk about some of the documentaries. I guess I'm here, you know, because of my book, Auntie Jane Knits Up a Storm. That's the reason I'm originally here. And yeah, I'm really happy with it. It's about grief and healing, and it's for kids, and I hope it's also for adults. And it did win a couple of awards, and I just wanted to mention that. Partly because I know there's people in your audience that are self-published authors. And one of the things, it's hard to get out there. So it's nice if you can get people to recognize you. And I just wanted to give people a tip that not all contests for self-published authors are the same. Some are really out to take your money. They take, they're expensive to enter. The prizes aren't great and whatever. I mean, it's still nice. I got an award for the best children's picture book from North Street Book Prize, which was really thrilling. And this is one of the good ones. So I would look into it if you're thinking about that. They actually give you a cash prize. They don't make you pay for stickers. They really make you feel like they're trying to help you get the book, which they really are behind, move it forward and promote it. And I think that's some of the reason that we hooked up. And then we were going to start about Weyburn, and that could lead to who knows where.
I am so glad you shared that information. And listeners, I will share the links and the list of all of Steve's books. The other one, your first one was Monster Cheese. And I also am so grateful because he sent me autographed copies of all 4 of them. So you guys can be jealous. But you can go and get them all on Amazon. And they're just so great. And Auntie Jane Knits Up a Storm is about grief, right? And it ties into that. And I will also share before this episode goes out, I'm going to share the blooper of me trying to record the intro to your episode because I could not say socioeconomic status. I think that was a part I was going to say in the intro. And it's hysterical. I try and say it, and then I'm frustrated. I'm like, I'll just clip that. And I try and say it again, and I get screwed up. I think I tried 3 times, and finally I'm just like serenity. So if you listen to that episode, you'll see I do not use that word in the intro because I just gave up. But you did spend a lot of time and really trying to, when you were still doing your dentistry, trying to help individuals. Really, you had this idea that everyone deserves to have dentistry, regardless of if they can pay for it or not. And that caused, a lot of frustration in the healthcare system and politics during those times, right? And we can, as listeners, and so much of RAN is we also believe everyone should have the right to medical care of all sorts, including mental wellness care. So we align very much on that.
Yeah, I hope today, in talking about Weyburn, we'll talk a little bit about, mental wellness care, emotional care, and how it's changed over the years. And I have a few ideas about maybe what we should be doing to make things better. So I hope we can get to that a little bit as well. So
yeah. Okay, in the classic when I say, is there anything you really hope we would talk to? Listeners, we need to all make sure that if we don't get to it, we get to it at that point at the end of the episode so we don't miss it. Okay, yeah. So where do we want to start? Who want to start? I mean, I watched the documentary. It is fabulous. And having been in a mental psych ward before a couple of times, I can totally relate to the insanity of several situations running it and the ways and the historic perspective that you shared in the documentary. about how individuals would actually end up in those treatment places back in those days, and the level of care that they would get. So you want to dig into how you got involved in the project to begin with?
Right. Yeah, I have to mention my friend and colleague Richard Diener. He originally started this. Unfortunately, he's passed away, but we did quite a few films together. But he was originally got involved, and then we were talking. He says, I could use some help on this, so it became a co-production between the two of us, and it was more difficult than we originally anticipated to put the story together. But it was a story that was being told by the University of Regina, a group from there that was doing site-specific performance. So they rehearsed a lot of the history, and they perform various parts of some of the psych nurses, some of the patients, some of the doctors in this. And so we recorded that. But then on top of that, we did interviews with people about what really happened there. And we brought in some of the history and that. I was thinking about why this started. I think that it was in around 1920 when they began to build it. And across North America, I think there were a number of institutions that were built around that time, large mental hospitals. And if you think what was happening in the Canada and the U.S., there were large farms with large family groups living together. And so what often happened is if you had someone that had an emotional or a mental health issue, they were taken care of by the family. But that wasn't always good for the person or the family. It was hard on them. And so those people ended up being kind of locked up in their own homes and things like that, and maybe abused in some ways, or it was just a lot of stress on the family. So around that time, people started to think, well, there must be a better way. We not just to lock these people up, but to help them. So when it was built in the 20s, it was really built to help people. It was that was their main goal. Ironically, this is going back a little. When I first came to Saskatchewan, I was in North Battleford, the city of North Battleford, working for the dental plan. And our office was on the grounds of the North Battleford Psychiatric Hospital. So had a little bit of an intro to that. And there was one interesting story I want to just relate. We had our staff there, and there was probably 60 people for a barbecue, and it was outside. It was a lovely day, and I had my dog there, and he was a friendly dog, and he's roaming around kids and family and everything, and all is well. And then all of a sudden I hear him growling, and I look, and he's baring his teeth, and this one person is walking into the group, and it's a patient, and he picked this guy out, and he guided him away. And when the guy went away, the dog came back. Everything was fine. About a half an hour later, I see the dog running the other direction. This guy had walked all the way around down by the river and come up through the woods and was trying to come in the other way. Dog found him. So of all those people, the dog was able to pick out something about that person, which, relates to when we talk later about treatments and whatever. I think, animals, we know that dogs can detect certain diseases, and they're being trained, and people are doing that more. So I think that we need to look at various mental and emotional conditions and see if dogs can help us in that area as well. We do know that they're helpful as companions and things like that, but they may also be able, through their sense of smell, to detect certain things in certain people. So quite interesting.
Yeah, I can totally believe that. As you probably recall, I have a service dog. I have severe PTSD from my kidnapping. And my first service dog that I got, he was a former competition dog, imported him from Germany. He was amazing. Loved all people and other animals, including cats. He wanted to kill squirrels for sure. But I remember being in Atlanta, and multiple times we passed this one bus stop with this one gentleman there, And I have no idea what it was about that person, but it's the only time I'd ever heard Kuba growl. And he did it on 2 different occasions. And he was basically like, you just stay away from us.
Mm-hmm.
And that sense and that intuition, and even, you know, the pheromones that we put off, that
Mm-hmm.
even to my dog, I remember with Kuba, when I took him to the hospitals when I was in treatment, he was there with me. And then when I would become really distressed, he would be all over me. And I, of course, am just like, get away from me. I don't want anything touching me. And my doctors are like, he's doing his jobs. Just let him do his job.
Right.
That's what he's supposed to do. Right. But yeah, that is super fascinating. Okay. So back to then the
Back to
times of when these
Weyburn,
were
yeah.
started. Yes.
So people were there for many different reasons. So there were people who probably were what we might call criminally insane or really dangerous, were brought in and locked up, or, you know, and they still tried to help. But there were a lot of other people with emotional issues and other, forms of mental illness that were in there. But they also brought in homeless people at times who needed looking after. Kids who were had developmental issues ended up at Weyburn. It was a place where people went for refuge at times because, you know, some of these people were being abused at home, so that it could become a refuge as well. And it was a lot of treatment for alcohol and drug addictions and various problems like that. So that was going on. So there was a whole array of things that were going on. Well, you know, it went through a number of different kinds of treatment. Back in the early days, one of the things they did were ice baths, and that was to shock people. They would put them into an ice bath and shock them. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with Wim Hof. Do you
Yes.
know
Wim
that?
Hof breathing.
Wim Hof
Yes.
breathing, and he's big on ice baths and
Yep.
being
He
able, you
is.
know, my son is Sasha is become a yoga instructor, and he's teaches breathing and things, and he's a follower of Wim Hof, and he keeps telling me I should take cold showers, and no thanks. I
Well,
don't know.
if you listen to Andrew Huberman's
Mm-hmm.
podcast, which was when I love his podcast, he's amazing. He is a big proponent of talking about, I know at least the shower piece of it. I'm a former athlete. Many of my friends who are still athletes have their ice tubs and they do their ice baths. I have zero tolerance for cold. And so I just keep saying, I don't know that I want to live that much longer, that it's gonna
Yeah.
increase my quality of life. Now, granted, as you know, I've been quite sick lately. I did find out like my thyroid is completely shot,
Mm.
completely under thyroid storm. So I'm finally getting medication for it. So I think maybe if they hadn't figured that out, I might have been desperate enough to try the
Right.
ice baths. But apparently there's a lot of science behind it.
No, there is, but I'm kind of like you. Well, I grew up in Florida, and I go into the Gulf of Mexico when it gets to be about 87 to 90 degrees, and I can just float around like just a lovely bath, you know, and it's very, very comforting. But Canadian lakes and me, I go in maybe once, but I don't like plunging into the cold. But anyway, but what I find interesting about it is that was one of the things they were first using, and now we're finding out that there was some good to it. So, you know, not everything was as bad as it seemed. I mean, when you first talk about it and you say, were they plunging these people in ice baths? You know, it sounds like cruel and unusual treatment, but it did help some people, kind of shock them in a way that could turn them around and maybe turn off some of the over emotions that they were having, and so they could focus on getting better. So that's always good. But so they moved on from that, and they used insulin shock. They would give people insulin and kind of pull their sugar way down and send them into shock through insulin. And then, of course, there was electroshock therapy. That was practiced there at various times, and it's still practiced, right?
Yep.
And we still use it, and it can be helpful, but if it's too much, it certainly can damage people on a permanent basis. But it has its place. Another thing they did were lobotomies. So there was a time when they were doing that. And I don't know if you know how they do it, but essentially it's fairly simple. They just take an instrument and put it in just over where your eye is, and kind of cut the prefrontal areas on the brain. And that's a lobotomy is done. Now, they don't use that much anymore. But one thing that I did read about lobotomies that I found quite interesting, this is back when I was in dentistry and trying to figure out pain and how that all worked, but was that people that had severe pain, I mean, they were in so much pain, they couldn't watch television, they couldn't talk to anybody, they were dying of cancer, and they just couldn't help these people. And so they would do a lobotomy on them. And the reaction was, yes, I'm in pain, but I don't care anymore. And so that's a bit of a clue about how, we can control pain. It kind of works like that without doing a lobotomy. We can teach ourselves to but maybe we can talk about that a bit later on. But
I can attest to that, because I will tell you this, I have a very high tolerance for pain. And I have, many people know, I have 2 arm sleeves. I have a lot of tattoos. I have a lot of that. And I can say that while getting a tattoo, I can, in my brain, calm myself down and just be like, no, this is fine. And I have found a couple of times in getting them where basically towards a really long session, then I was like, okay, never mind, I can't anymore. I feel like at 7 hours, and then my ability to maintain that control over the pain has now diminished, or maybe it's reached a threshold. I'm sure there's someone that might leave comments on this episode and share with us the science behind why I can get tattooed for 7 hours and then be done. But yeah, I can attest to the fact that I've used that skill in other times, like when I had my foot surgery and stuff like that. I've used mindfulness and, calming of the brain, breathing techniques, grounding techniques to overcome those sensations, because I am totally against, I am now taking all this thyroid medicine and everything, and that just is what it is. But if I don't have to take meds, I don't want to take meds.
Right. Oh, yeah. And that's kind of where it went later at Weyburn, as they started to develop different meds, right? And so they would try different early forms of tranquilizers and antipsychotics and things like that. But for the most part, early on, there weren't any good meds for people. But I don't know if you want to talk about pain control now, or come back to that, or
let's dig into it now. I love it. Let's go for it.
Yeah. Well, when I was in dentistry, one of the things that motivated me towards my patients was trying to figure out how to make them have the best experience possible. And so that was really my main goal, is to teach people to relax and be comfortable, and a lot of explanation so they weren't worried about it and things like that. At some point there was an opportunity to take hypnosis as an elective, so I took that, and I must admit I was really surprised at how effective it could be in controlling pain. I remember I had one patient, and she was needed a lot of deep cleaning in her gums and around that, and which can be quite painful. And it takes a lot of local anesthetic, and it's better if you don't have to. But with her, she didn't really want that. But we talked about hypnosis, and so we had a session, and I taught her so that if she could take her finger and rub it on the area, it would become numb. So I'm working away on her. And generally in the midline between on your top teeth, the nerves. Oh, sorry. Oh, well, talking with your hands. Anyway, so the nerves cross over. And so, when you give somebody anesthetic, it doesn't just stop in the middle, it goes to the next side a little bit. Well, I just crossed over to the other side just a little bit. And she goes, that's not numb yet. And I realized I hadn't believed that she was that numb, right? It was new to me. So I had more experiences with people, being able to give them anesthetic through hypnosis. A friend of mine had a tooth extracted through hypnosis and things like that. And most recently, I've gotten interested in helping people with chronic pain, because chronic pain is tough, and your experience is really good, because a lot of people with chronic pain can get a little bit disappointed because the pain just doesn't totally go away. It's hard to keep it under control. So you have to build up that power in a way, and through a lot of exercises and doing that. And after a while, you can get fatigued, and there is a limit to what you can do. But if you talk to a lot of people with chronic pain, what they want is some relief, even if it's not 100% full time. They just want the pain to go away for a while so they can just be pain free and relax and put that behind them. So I've been able to help people learn to dial it down, almost like a thermostat, turn it down. Or you might think of a dimming light to turn the dimmer down so that you can bring the pain down. And what you're teaching is that, well, the pain, most people don't understand that pain does not exist in all our cells and our fingertips, and the pain is only in our mind. Now, that doesn't mean that pain isn't real. Pain is real. Don't get me wrong. Some people say, well, you're just saying it's in my mind. Well, it's very real and it's important. But what happens is that because we get a signal to the brain then has the executive function, which is deciding, how should I react to that? Ooh, I think it's pain. Ouch. When you move your hand off the burner or you do what's ever appropriate. But what can often happen is that there is some chronic pain, and there's nothing new happening. There's nothing new and dangerous happening, but there's just that ongoing pushing on some nerve or some area that's sending that signal that this is probably a good time to say pain. So you can tell your brain, no, it's okay. I know about that problem. We'll just keep that in the background. And if something traumatic happens, something bad happens, then you'll feel it if something new happens. But in the meantime, you can keep it dialed down. And I also tell people that, that it will often come back as they get tired and things like that. Or, and you can give them exercises to help them, put them to sleep and help them sleep when they've got a pain situation. So it's mindfulness, it's hypnosis, it's all kind of the same thing. A lot of people, one of my first experiences, I was a kid, and my sister and I think I was about 6 or 7, and we were running after something. She was younger than me, and I had to beat her, and I tripped and fell and cut my finger, this finger here, on a bottle. But I didn't know it. I got up and I was running and didn't feel a thing. And then I looked down and there's blood, right? And oh my gosh, ow, and pain. And so, and that happens to a lot of people. You get a cut or an injury, and essentially you don't feel the pain until you've seen it in a different way. And then the pain is there. So even with, people working in emergency rooms, at hospitals, if they understand some of these techniques about helping people get distracted from what's going on and the pain and making them comfortable and they're understanding what's going on, you can take them out of that awful pain situation without having to totally anesthetize them or give them, lots and lots of drugs. So it can happen. And I used to do that with little kids with dentistry.
I was about to say, isn't that how you really got into
Mm-hmm.
writing the books,
Yeah.
right? Is you would tell the children's stories while working on them. And then at some point, you told me how you decided
Mhm.
to eventually write Monster Cheese. Forgive me, I forgot what it is. So go ahead and remind
Yeah.
us. But I do recall it was telling these children's stories.
Absolutely. I'd been telling kids stories and that helped them relax. And sometimes, you could even get them to imagine they were watching a TV that wasn't even there, because they're motivated to do something else. Of course, now we have TVs and dental offices and stuff like that, but it's still important to get them to focus on something away from that and keep their mind active, but on something that's interesting them, a baseball story or favorite pet or something, right? But yeah, the Monster Cheese book, that was kind of fun because I was with my sister Ellen, who's my co-author for Filbert the Lonely Flamingo. She's still in Florida. She hasn't left Florida. I'm the one that left and didn't come back. But for some reason, I go back when I can. Anyway, yeah, we were up at Lake Louise in the Rocky Mountains, and we were coming back, and she smelled a wildflower and sneezed, and it was funny. She almost fell over, and we started just making kind of poems or rhymes. Ellen, you sneezed a great big sneeze at Lake Louise. It was so big it probably started a monster, like a monster sneeze cheese, monster cheese. And then, I have had little kids at home at that point and tell them the story. And it changed a lot. And then I decided to write it. That's the hard part. Telling the story over and over again, but then when you decide to put it down on paper, um, nothing's going to change once you get those words down in the book. So each word becomes really important. You want to make sure it's exactly what you want to say. And I had some help from a friend or a person who became a friend that was kind of a mentor, helped me, learn how to do that more effectively. So that was how, stories start in so many different ways. And it's like, yeah, Weyburn, we got involved with that film and we thought we were just going to do this kind of documentary of this play that they were putting on. But then it became much more. We really wanted to tell the story of that building and the people that have been there and the things that they had gone through and the good things, the good, the bad, and the ugly. There were some bad things that went there. I think we mentioned last time one of the difficulties was not everybody that was there should be there. We talked to this one one older man who'd come in when he was like 8 or 9. His father had, I think, died or left or something, but the mom had 3 kids. She met a man, said, "Hey, I'd like to have you in my life, but not your kids." So she found places with her family for the other 2 kids, but nobody wanted him. They took him to the doctor. Oh, yeah, I think he's a little bit off. We'll send him to Weyburn. So this poor kid, from the time he's 9 till he's 18, lived in Weyburn. And yeah.
And tried to escape with his girlfriend at the time. They didn't
Yeah,
make it very far.
it didn't. They got caught and come back. Yeah, it's a really touching story, and what amazes me is that he turned out to be a pretty good guy. That he has a family and his kids. I did talk to his kids, and I said, he does some strange things. Has to make a bed in a certain way because that's how he learned to do it at the hospital and things like that. So it was quite quite interesting.
Well, I was thinking when you were telling the story about cutting your hand, and I was thinking I also am often aware of the times that when you're thinking about the brain controlling pain and controlling that, or it being in your mind
Mm-hmm.
at some point. I remember I also sliced my arm once. I was sharpening a knife and I was talking. And whereas you were talking with your hands and you knocked over your microphone, I was talking with my hands and did just a little bit of a turn. And instead of hitting the thing to whatever, I sliced open my finger all the way to the bone. And I remember that moment and I instantly grabbed it to apply pressure. and said to my husband at the time, I need to go get stitches. And because I was so calm, he was like, oh, it's not really that bad. He was like, let me see. And I was like, nope, we just need to go get stitches. And I
Yeah.
think I ended up getting like 20 something stitches, right?
Wow.
Like the nurses really gave him a hard time because I was just like calm and I was just continuing to hold it in there and like just said to them, just trust me. And
Yeah.
like, finally I was like, I saw the bone. I know I need stitches.
No, lovely. Yeah.
But it was, and I had another guest. We were talking about this. I've had moments in my life, like when I was escaping the kidnapping or something like that, where I've been able to purely focus on what the next survival step is and ignore that. And I think oftentimes what I see is, for example, for use me as an example, because of what is happening with my thyroid, it's putting a lot of pressure here. So I have like constant pressure that's becomes over time, especially if I'm already tired, super annoying. And
Hmm.
that you're like, when my brain thinks about it, then I become more tired because I'm using up additional energy trying to deal and focus on this pain. So it has this compounding factor. So I can only imagine individuals who are in chronic pain having that, just also adding so much more exhaustion to their life of having to work through and deal with that. And I love thinking about ways such as music. Music is a big thing for me. It's just another way also to kind of distract yourself, to calm yourself,
Hmm.
and to be able to be mindful in the moment. And so music has been a way in my life, or even just repeating scriptures in my head over and over and over again, or songs over and over and over. In fact, when I used to race Ironmans, I had songs because, if you don't know, when you race an Ironman, you're not allowed to have your own music. So the only music you get, or if there are people who are on the side of the road when you're running, are blasting music. But your swim and your bike, you have no music. And so I learned, though, how to memorize all these songs, and then I would play them to myself in my head. And during those tough times, or if I felt like I was in pain, or if I felt like I wanted to quit, I would just keep going using some of those skills, which I'm grateful for having learned those, because then later, during the kidnapping and surviving that and everything, having the ability to use some of those tools really, I mean, for the most part, saved my life. And so understanding the science behind how these tools actually interact with the way that you perceive, the energy coming from neurons, or, the response from these pain cells and the nerves and stuff like that is really fascinating to me. But I'm also a biomedical engineer, so I could nerd out on science all day long.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, I think that's why we get along. I did a lot of research and things getting up to this point, and yeah, I love it. But yeah, because there are studies now that show that these do work. A lot of it was just hearsay and whatever, but they have a lot of controlled studies now that have shown that people, hypnosis and mindfulness is an effective way to control pain. When you're talking about music, it just reminded me, there was this fellow that I knew, and he was a really good lacrosse player, but he came up to me and says, they told me you did hypnosis and I'm having issues. I can't really focus and whatever. And we talked a bit, and I said, well, what do you do to relax on the way to the game? He says, well, I put on my headphones and listen to music, but can't do that during the game. I said, well, here's what we're going to do. So we hypnotize him so that when the whistle blew or whatever the signal was, he would start playing his playlist in his mind, and that would just take him out of himself into the music, and he could just be more relaxed, because when he started to think too much, he was messing up. Well, after that, I had some people come up to me and said, what you did, this guy was already an animal. You've turned him into something outrageous. I guess it's a tough game, lacrosse. And
Yeah.
anyway, so yeah, it worked, but some people weren't as happy with it.
Well, I'm sure the people that were the opponents, I'm sure were like, what did he do? And what I would want to say, do to me what you did. Like, I want some of that natural magic, I would say. So then you transitioned out of dentistry after frustration of not being able to provide care to everyone and
Yeah.
only those who could provide it. And then you started doing these books and these documentaries. So tell us a little bit about that. Must have been a really hard decision for you after spending so much of your education and life and passion in that
Right.
field, and then to make that pretty significant transition. So tell us a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, it wasn't as hard as it could have been. I had some good support. So, I mean, it wasn't somebody, my partner at the time says, yeah, we can do this. But it is a big thing. And it worries other people more than it worried me, because a lot of other people were like, how can you do that? Everybody wants to be a dentist. That's success. How can you move away from that? But, as I said, going through dental school, I discovered I wasn't a private practice person. So public health became my thing, and I got a master's degree in public health. So in a lot of ways, I was moving from dentistry, public health dentistry, where there really wasn't much of a future. The dentists in private practice had really gained the power there, and most public health dental programs are really underfunded in the U.S. and Canada. And so when it came time, when this program that I was working on and loved went away, I looked at other opportunities, but they weren't for me. Now, when I was in dental school, a friend of mine, for one birthday, gave me a book on how to make films, how to be a filmmaker. So I think he already knew. I was already fooling around with making videos or films. I guess we had Super 8 film back at then, no video. But so I was interested in it. And I had been telling these stories, and a couple of them I thought, I'd like to write those down. So I was ready to push on into those areas. So it wasn't a huge decision, but it was scary because now there wasn't that regular income, and you had to find other things. But I've done some consulting, public health consulting. Worked with some First Nations communities to find out, to help them do community health plans, and so sort of broadened from just the dental part of it. And if you look at my films, most of them have something to do with health and public health. The Mozambique film, the first one was about dentistry. The second one was about their general health and the health system, and recovering from the Civil War. I did one in Belize that was about a young man who was an apprentice learning how to be a traditional healer, but he is also learning the skills of GPS mapping and things like that. So, you're working on one hand as a traditional healer, and the other hand, he's with satellite mapping. And what he was doing, he was helping these healers map their medicine trails in the rainforest. So they would go off into the rainforest and find various things, and some of them were quite rare, some of their medicines, and so they would mark them on these maps and know where they were, and then they could also see how they're doing from time to time, etc. So it was really interesting, very interesting to talk to these people about traditional medicine. I asked one of the healers, so what do you do mostly? He said, mostly deal with snake bites. And okay. So I asked my crew, so okay, if we're out here in the jungle with all these snakes in the rainforest, what are you doing? Are you going to the hospital, or are you going to the healer?
And what
And
was their response?
most of them said hospital. I said, I'm going to have the healer first, and then we're going to go to the hospital. But some of the snakes, there wasn't anti-venom necessarily in the country, but interesting.
Yeah,
But
and I would be thinking, okay, exactly what kind of boots and stuff am I wearing right now? Let me think
oh
about
yeah,
this. a little bit more.
And there's some
I
wicked snakes there. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I was sharing the story. We were out whitewater rafting recently and saw a snake on a rock. We were just talking about snakes. And I said my most interesting snake story that I've heard of was after coming back from my trip to Mozambique. I'd become Facebook friends with some of the people there. And one of the guys posted a photo one day of his engine, like the hood was pulled up in his engine, and it of course looked very much like it was a green hose wrapped around that engine. It was not a green hose, that was a green mamba wrapped around that
Oh,
engine.
oh my.
And with all the dogs and stuff around, it took, I can't even remember how long he said it took for them to get the snake out of there. But it's, you can imagine, the last thing I want to encounter is a green mamba. I'd be like, okay, never mind. Let's just get rid of the truck. Somebody come and get it and be done with it. But yeah, no.
Well, we did encounter a green mamba with the second Mozambique film, and the way it was set up, we had a sound person and a camera person, and they were actually wired together. Now that's mostly wireless, but at that point they were wired, and so there was a snake. We were in a village, and the head man or whoever we were talking to was going after the snake. So I said to the cameraman, "Go, film, And the sound person went the other way, and the wires boing, Anyway, I didn't blame her. So anyway, but she kind of came back at a bit of a distance. But yeah, we were safe. But we also filmed in a minefield, which was another whole thing. There were mines all over. I don't know if you were still dealing with landmines when you were there, but
Yeah.
they warned us, if you're in the village, stay on the path. Don't walk over there in the grass, because there's not all the landmines have been cleared. And when there's flooding and stuff, they get up, float around, and go to a new place. So we were talking about that story because it's certainly a health issue. And so we were filming a Mozambican mine clearing group right in the up close to where they were and all that. And, it was all fine. But later we found out that they weren't properly equipped and trained, and a lot of them were getting hurt, so we were with, I guess we'd put ourselves in a bit of a situation, but thank goodness everything worked out okay. Anyway,
So
always little things.
adventures and lots of interesting places in the world. Okay, so we definitely wanted to talk about the lack of what's the word I want to say, the best type of care for individuals for all different types of mental wellness. And I know you shared that you have some ideas on how to improve the systems in our countries with challenges. So why don't we dig into that? Because I know
Sure.
all the listeners will be very passionate to hear about that.
Yeah. Well, let's carry on with Weyburn in the sense that when it closed, so it closed, and what they discovered, and I think they knew what was going to happen, is that a lot of people there still needed hospitalization, needed some were never going to be out, and some needed secure hospitalization until they could be out and into the community. So that was important. And I think I might have mentioned it before, but this one particular architect, Izuma, in Saskatchewan, when he was planning a new, smaller facility, took LSD in order to try and understand how people who were having various kind of
Psychotic episodes and
yes, how they would feel and how they would see this place, and so he used it for that. But anyway, so there were all these people were let out, and a lot of them were essentially in recovery. Now they had tranquilizers, antipsychotics, and they were able to give them all these meds in the community. But what wasn't there for them and still isn't there for them, I feel, is the people who are moving forward with their recovery, is not the support when little things start to go wrong. They just need somebody to talk to them for a few minutes, have a coffee for a few minutes. They don't need the ambulance to come running with the siren and haul them off to the emergency room and
Or
fill
the
them
police
full of drugs,
cars to
or the
come with
police.
the handcuffs and take
Absolutely.
them in.
So we really need to look at some sort of community-based people. Now, I've dealt with what we call community health representatives up here who work on various communities, and they deal with a lot of different health issues. So there could be, community health workers that have training in mental and emotional health issues. But maybe what we really need is like a psych nurse, but with training more to deal with people in the community. So they have an office or a home that could be open for these individuals to come and just, when you're feeling something, to come in and spend a couple hours to talk and perhaps also to help them through the system. Because I know here, and I'm sure in the States, when you do have an issue, there's all sorts of problems figuring out where to fit into the system, how you get yourself into it, how you get the right treatment and all that. So we need people that can keep people out of the system, out of emergency, can help them just with the small little pat on the back, a hug or whatever it is, some advice, just an ear to listen to. And if they do need some additional help that's above what this person can do, they can help them through that, because there's nothing more frustrating. I know one of the issues that we dealt with in our family is that our one daughter was going through detox, and she finally, it was hard to get her into detox. When you finally get her into detox, done with it, ready for treatment, oh, well, maybe in 6 weeks we can get you in. Well, by 6 weeks, she was back using, right? So these parts of the thing have to fit well together. And there's a lot of, concern about costs, of course, and what's this going to cost? But I don't think we're looking at the real cost of what it costs our society if we don't take care of people who are on their way to recovery, who have all these problems. Then they break down, and it costs us in so many other ways. The other thing that I think it's important to remember in all our in treatment is that it's multi-generational. When people got out of Weyburn, a lot of, I think I mentioned, so we're going to get people away from their extended families into Weyburn. Well, a lot of those people never really made up with their family again. It was a family break. And so they didn't have those family ties to go back to. So they're back in the community trying to survive in a halfway house or on their own in other ways. In Canada and in the States, I hear recently there's been a lot of talk about boarding schools and industrial schools for American Indian people that were taken away from their communities. And in Canada, they were called, boarding schools. They were, not, anyway, they were the same kind of thing. So people would be taken away from their family and put into a school that would not allow them to speak their language, etc., would take away all their traditions, keep them from their families. So it became, when they left those schools, they were then out in the community where they never had any experience in parenting. Like, their parents weren't parenting them. The people in those schools weren't parenting them. They were abusing them in a lot of cases, but they certainly weren't parenting them. So here's a generation. And then they had kids. So what happens to those kids? When those kids are parented, they also have a problem. It's the same thing with mental health. We're dealing with, we have twin granddaughters who are 13. We've been raising for 5 years now. And more than that, so 8 years, sorry. Time goes fast. And anyway, yeah, nobody worries about us. We can get treatment for them to a certain extent, but that's kind of tricky as well. But the caregivers and the other people in the family, the other people in the community, friends, and could be coworkers, they're all impacted by what happens when people have some of these other issues. And so the trauma doesn't stop with the person that's being traumatized and then trying to go into recovery. It's all the people around them. And everybody would be doing so much better if there was support for all these people. So we need to figure out how to do that. I know there, and I think that one of the situations that we need to look at is the control of the medical system by the upper echelons, by the doctors and the higher, the psychiatrists and all those people, because they don't want to release any of that down to people that can maybe do it just as well, but aren't as highly trained. And because, we do need to be careful that the quality is there, and we can't just let anybody do it. And we have to make sure it's done ethically and properly, and there's no abuse. But we can't let doctors just say, I'm doctors, and nobody's else going to do anything that I'm doctoring. We need to have, nurse practitioners, psychological, emotional nurse practitioners to help out in the community. I think those things just make a big difference for everybody.
Well, I think one of the things that's really big about what you're saying, Steve, is the reminder that an illness, a challenge, an addiction, a abuse, a rape, a kidnapping, or anything like that, it doesn't just impact the individual, it impacts the entire community. And the individual, when they come, they need a healthy community to be in. When episode 8, when I talked to Janine, we talked about this idea of therapy burnout. And we talked about one of the challenges being that in most treatment centers, they don't have family-based treatment for recovery. They're not educating the family members and allowing them to understand it. And so it's this, she used this metaphor of a sick tree in a forest, right? And you take the sick tree in and you heal it, and it's starting to recover, it's starting to have new leaves and new branches. And then if you just take it and put it back into that sick forest, well, then it's going, I mean, we wonder why the relapse rate is so high. You wonder why the struggles are so, or they may manifest in a completely different way. However, if we had a model that was healing that sick tree and also healing the forest and providing resources and paths towards success for that whole forest, then when you reunite those together, imagine the beauty and the health that can happen. And I know JD on we had a 2-part series on eating disorders. She was a mother, her daughter had a severe eating disorder, and she then later, she runs a family-based treatment center for the entire family to work through the eating disorder challenge and what that looks like, because it does impact all of those individuals, and stopping the cycle is exactly it. And so when we at RAN, for example, the whole reason the founders at RAN started this nonprofit was because we saw individuals who are in treatment for one thing or the other. It could be grief, it could be depression, it could be alcohol or some other addiction, it could be an eating disorder. And when their insurance, who, by the way, is a panel of people who don't know this individual, decides on their review day that, oh, no, they're fine, just send them home. And then they suddenly go home. It can be so much more traumatic for that individual who's not set up for success. Their family is not set up for success. And so RAND is working to be able to provide at least bridge grants to give a little bit more time, to set up some time for some of that aftercare to be planned out, and not just the very next day booking a ticket to cross country, which is what happened on the morning that RAN came into the dreams of the founders. Was someone that happened to, and she was booking her ticket to fly back cross country the very next day, and she was working so hard in her recovery. And so it was just so devastating to see, where then you see individuals such as like myself or Ben, another one of the co-founders, who's the COO of Recovery Advocate Network, he was in there. We tell a story in one of the earlier episodes. He was in because his 3-year-old daughter suddenly passed away, and they have no idea what caused it. And he was in med school at the time, and he completely took years off med school because he was like, I don't even know if I can be in a hospital after this, right? And thank goodness that he was able to get recovery, that I will say he is now officially Dr. Ben Danes. He just got his MD in May. Finally, he went back to medical school, practicing emergency medicine, which I think is so amazing. I think any patients that come across him in an emergency room, especially if they're with some psychiatric or psychological or addiction issues, where you have areas where in the different areas of the country where someone comes into the emergency room with an overdose or something like that, and the nurses and people don't want to say that's what it is, because there's just become this mindset that individual chose this way of life, and so they don't deserve the same level of care as someone else is, right? And there's this internal biases that we create mostly off of ignorance and mostly of not understanding the whole being and the whole person. So when we're talking earlier about pain, yes, pain is present, however, it's also in your mind. And when you think about your whole being and your whole person, you can work to navigate that. Addiction also, it's the whole being, it's the whole person. And part of that is not this barrier that ends at our skin. Our whole being and our whole person is everyone we come in contact with, the people that I try my best to say hello, and I try and get a smile out of everyone that I meet. I will tell you, the hardest person was the lady at the DMV when I was getting my license last time. Like, I kid you not, Steve. I was determined to make this lady smile, and she was just not going to smile until finally I commented on she had some really funky earrings. I can't remember what they were. I think they were like flamingos or something like that. And but you know what? I found something that was personal to her and saw her as a human being. And I think so much of recovery and any health space is seeing individuals as human beings who all matter, who all have their struggles, their strives, and their challenges, and deserve to live the best life that they can. And when we can help them, it also helps us live our best life, which is like so it gives me warm feelings all over just thinking about that.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the things through education that we can do, is to help people who don't see themselves as health providers, but they're the person at DMV or something that can just give you a little bit of a smile and not make your day cloudier, so to speak, and we can all pitch in for that. So it's kind of everyday adding to our pot of emotional health. And I know we can do it. Now, in Canada, the healthcare is covered, including mental health care. However, it's emotional and mental health problems are really underfunded. If you've got cancer, you get great treatment. You got heart disease. You got all these other things. If you're in hospital for medical problems, that's fine. But once you get to the mental health stages, it's just not the same support. And again, it's hard to find the resources when you need them, and there's nobody out in the community. There's the people I was talking about, where you need to help you before you get into a real crisis. So when you're getting to the edge of that crisis, so you haven't quite gone over the hill. So we have a long ways to go here too, but we do have the advantage that a lot of our care is covered. So you don't get into a situation where you need to be hospitalized or something and you can't. But, emergency rooms and places where they see people, there's definitely prejudices. Dying, I've been around older people, and I have one friend who passed away when she was almost 105. And she was trying to tell the people in the emergency room she didn't want a poke and she didn't want this or that and the other. And I had to kind of stand up for her, because, the lady's 105. She's kind of on her way out. She's happy. She just let it be, why. But it just, you get into a focus and a narrow sight, where we just got to do our thing.
Well, and I have a similar experience. So back when I was proctoring surgery as a field clinical engineer with Medtronic, working with advanced heart pacemakers, defibrillators, valves, things of that sort. Okay. And this is when I learned that doctors, for the most part, are not trained on how to handle end of life conversations and end of life situations. So I had a patient and she was having complete organ failure. She couldn't qualify for any organ donations because her risk assessment with the other organs was so high. Amazing woman and her husband. I mean, I just adored them. So I spent probably like 2 months with them or something like that in the hospital. And towards the end, when I could see her chart, I know that this lady only has a very little bit of time. She wants to be out of intensive care. She's sick of the bright lights, the constant noise, and the constant beepings and the constant probes. And I remember walking in one day, and I think her husband's name was Johnny. I remember walking in one day, and I haven't disclosed any PHI listeners right now because there are a gazillion Johnnies in the world. But I walk into this hospital, and I look at her chart, and I see all this blood, the things that it lists, what are you going to do today? And it listed all this stuff. And I pulled her husband aside. I said, what are they doing? And he's like, well, the nurses came in and said, we have to do that. And I was like, whoa, wait, you need to advocate for her. There's no value. These are just going to be numbers that are going to go in her health chart when she passes away. And he was able to stand up to them. I said, your wife wants to go home. She wants to die at home. She does not want to die in the ICU where her family can't be with her. She can't be in her surroundings. And so he advocated for her. They got hospice. They transported her to her house and her living room. And that night, I got a text message and a phone call from her husband. She passed away at home with the people around her that she wanted. And that to me is a reminder of these things. Like, take a step back, stop looking at a checklist. And we can do this in any of our jobs that we're doing. I mean, I used to say when I was getting my engineering degree, one of the best things that this one teacher really stressed, it was Todd McElroy, I think is how you pronounce his last name. Anyway, it was whenever you're looking at a physics problem or something like that, you should look at what the proposed answer is and take a step back and say, does this make sense? Like, does building it this way make sense? Take a moment back and use the human component of you and think about that. And I think the exact same thing in healthcare, in looking at the list of tests or looking at the list of what kind of environment you're going to put someone in or something like that, is to encourage people to take a step back and say, whoa, wait, does this really make sense?
Absolutely.
And if not, then let's be creative and come up with something that does make sense. And for me, that's what true total care is. Not just check. I mean, a first year medical student could go through and have a checklist and check off a whole bunch of things and be done with that, right? So it's not that. It is checking in and seeing that human and saying, does this make sense?
Yeah. In Canada now, we do have a right to die program. So people who are at end of life and meet certain qualifications, they have to make the decision while they're still able to. In other words, they can't, if you wait till you're too far gone, you can't. You aren't capable of making that decision, but you can decide. And I do have a friend who chose that, and he had fought for, I think it was 9 years of prostate cancer, and it finally, it just overwhelmed him, and it wasn't comfortable. He was dying, and he decided to die, as he wanted to, and family was there, everybody was there, and it worked out for him and his family fine, and so for some people it's not the answer, and I understand that. There are concerns about it, and it could, there's concerns that it'll be abused. As far as I can see, it's hard to do. You have to really make the case. So I don't think it's being abused, but, it is one more thing that says, hey, the patient, we have to really look at what makes sense. You can't just do these things willy-nilly and just because that's what we do.
Yep. Okay. So is there anything you really hope we would cover today that we haven't covered this time, Dr.
Oh,
Wolfson?
I think so. You can call me Steve, but anyway, nobody calls me Dr. Wolfson. Yeah, no, I think we could keep talking forever. There's tons of things we could talk about, but anyway, I
I'm so
really am.
grateful you decided to come back and tell us the other part of the story. I can only imagine how interesting your life is raising twin 13-year-old girls. Sure, interesting days every day of the week in your household, without a doubt. So thank you for taking that on and doing that and offering that. It's got to be such a gift to them and to your community around you. Okay, we still need, though, and you may have to come up with a new motivational quote, or you can share the one you did before.
No. Well, we have to have a new one. Well, I just thought as we were talking before, something from medical training is the hardest thing to do is nothing. And that goes for not just medical training, for a lot of things. I mean, sometimes we see people in some sort of crisis and we want to get in there and do something. And sometimes we have to do nothing for a while. That doesn't mean we ignore things when we should do something, but sometimes the hardest thing for us to do is nothing. And we go into, antibiotics. I mean, people want those for things that they shouldn't have when they go to the doctor, and they're pushing the doctors, and a lot of the doctors just cave and just, yeah, you want antibiotics, boom, I know I'm not supposed to give them to you, but here it is. So, we really need to put that out there. And again, that what we were talking about, emergency room for people that are dying. I mean, sometimes we have to do nothing or just make sure that they're as comfortable as possible, but we aren't taking 18 blood tests just to see what's still going on. I mean, they're on their way out. So yeah, I think that's one I would say can help people through a lot of different things. But don't take it wrong. You do something when you have to do it, but there are times when nothing is the best thing, and often that's the hardest thing.
Absolutely. I think it goes back to us seeing each other as humans and taking a step back and saying, does this make sense? Let's follow what really makes sense, and then be disciplined to follow that, and have, not disciplined, courageous to follow that when that's the case. So thank you so much for joining us a second time. I am very grateful.
Well, thank you. Keep sending out these good positive messages for healing and rehabilitation. We're getting better.
Absolutely. Enjoy your day. Thank you so much.
Yes, you too. Bye for now.
Bye. Thank you for joining us today with your coffee and conversation. We hope you've been encouraged and learned something from today's story. To learn more about today's guest, please check out our show notes for more details. Now it's time to remember to like this episode, subscribe, and turn on your notifications to ensure you do not miss future episodes. Recovery Advocate Network envisions a world where individuals with mental health challenges receive comprehensive and effective treatment without the worry of financial burdens to themselves or their families, all without the stigmas often present in society. We are proud that every individual worked with RAN does so on a 100% volunteer basis. You can support the mission by making a financial donation via PayPal or Venmo, or email donate@recoveryadvocatenetwork.org if you would like to donate items for our next fundraising auction. Please visit our website at www.recoveryadvocatenetwork.org to learn more. Now, stay in the loop about upcoming events, future episodes, and more by following us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter X, TikTok, LinkedIn, and all major podcast platforms. As a reminder, the experiences and advice expressed in this episode are the host and guest's own personal stories and do not represent the opinions of any organization mentioned. RAN is passionate about opening the doors for all voices and experiences, not just those expressed in any particular podcast. If you want to share your experiences or expertise, we encourage you to be a future guest by emailing us at podcast@recoveryadvocatenetwork.org or submit a blog by emailing blog@recoveryadvocatenetwork.org. We also encourage you to comment on the episode so that we can continue to provide content that is most beneficial to the community. How do you do that? Visit our website at www.recoveryadvocatenetwork.org, and in the top right corner, click that comment button and comment. So listeners, what do you need to do? Pause what you're doing, subscribe, follow us. Please give us a like and a 5-star rating, write some meaningful comments, and most importantly, share these episodes with your friends. You never know whose heart you will touch, so please be a part of a reason someone has new hope today. If this episode was triggering to you, we encourage you to contact your support system, therapist, national and community support groups, the Global Crisis Text Line by texting 741-741, and/or if in the U.S., dialing 988 to reach the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. If you're in the U.S. and need additional resources such as shelter, support group resources, transportation, food, and/or a safe, confidential path out of physical or emotional domestic abuse, please call 211 or visit www.211info.org for assistance. Now, we know you are very busy, and we are grateful that you said yes to sharing time with us today. If you stuck to our 3 C's of engagement and listened to the full episode, then visit the podcast section of our website and leave the comment about the podcast, and you'll be entered to win an autographed copy of one of the books from one of our book club series, as well as a Coffee and Conversation coffee mug. So thanks again. Until next time, back to your coffee.